Yeah, I'm out here looking for weeds. I'm 4 right, 3 down because the sun is out on Cute Dessert. A 1080p still. I'm looking for, I think I found another weed that I quite like. It's this type. So this type one here, but I'll just take a small one. And we'll take it down to the tap. Because we have all things like Kaipo daisies there, growing there. And we got our Sonkus there, we got our composite there, that one that sort of fluoresces magenta orange when you put UV lamp on it. Another little seedling over there. Got some of this Arabica, Betsy grass or thing. But you've noticed the soil is grey. Could be important, fellas. Keep talking about all this grey soil business. So yeah. So we've had a lot of rain now after having the driest July on record, whereas last year we had the hottest June. We now have the driest July on record. And yeah, but I'm making progress with the bottles. I'm bluish. You might be able to control the actual the hue of the blue, dark blue to sort of lighter blues by controlling what you put in the water. So basically the idea is, the plants will suck up the red organism in its red state, and they'll be reddish. And if they suck it up in the blue form, the little protein packets, they'll be bluish or glaucous. A bit like Drossa gigantea. And it probably explains why Drossa gigantea can grow so big. As I said, on the second season I went to Kansas Swamp, I got the bug or the urge to actually have a look, at the tube, how far were the tubers down and that. And as I said, I got to a hole to my armpit, and I was nowhere close. So yeah, nowhere close, and I was up to my armpit as a 10-year-old child then, because that's my second season at Kansas Swamp. I got the urge or the itch, because the first season I was there, I didn't actually find Drossa gigantea on the first trip. It wasn't until a later trip, I think it was the second or third one, and I remember going back to the car, having a discussion with my mum, saying, I've seen this this small tree. It's like a small Christmas tree out there, but it's got sundew traps on the end of its branches, on the branches basically. And I said, so logically, if it's got sundew traps on it, it must be a sundew, right? But it's a tree, Mum. I was saying, but it's a tree sort of thing. Yeah, I've gone into doing these, and I'm just going to plant this one down there. So basically, what I've noticed is a difference between this type of sand and this sand. This sand holds twice as much for this grain size of fluid as that grain size. So I'll be measuring the grain size, and I'll later on in the year I'll be taking my micrometer over to WA, and I'll measure the grain size over there. And yeah, it's amazing just keeping them much wetter. Because I think basically these plants are actually aquatic plants. I think that's what some of these signs on these plants are telling us, that they're actually. You think they're just normal weeds. I think they're more aquatic plants. And this one in particular, if I go to Spot Cullen on this, can you see the way it sort of goes across the ground, but also has this like rosette shape as the a stem, I suppose. Is it a travelling rhizome sort of thing? Travelling sort of, what do they call it in classical botany? Travelling something or other they call it. Strawberries and that, travelling, I've forgotten what it is now. It's called a travelling something or other. It's a bit like that. So as they travel across the soil, they're also producing like a rosette, and as they go across. Part of a sign, I'll say, of a somewhat semi-aquatic to aquatic plant sort of the habit, I suppose. So this weed is really more indicative of being an aquatic plant, or able to cope with very wet conditions. And I think this is a general trend with all these weeds, actually. I think that's a bit of an indicator. But anyway, I put it in, and of course I cut this sort of double slot here sort of thing in there, and I've just done this one here, and I'm just going to cut along there, so it's basically flush or level with the sand. I'm just going to plant this one in here. It doesn't really matter where it goes in, as long as I put a whole range of the same sort of plants in there, and we'll just put it in there, down there, and it should be off and running sort of thing, and going, and we'll see how it goes. So this whole pot will remain basically anaerobic, and I think that's half the problem is you don't keep it anaerobic, and you have all these problems with iron and things like that. It just doesn't, because iron, it's one of the two classical forms of iron, if this is going to drive you crazy. Back in the days of Wilfarth and Hellriegel, when they had this 25-year struggle to show rather than prove that legumes actually fix nitrogen from the atmosphere, during this stage there was this argument about two forms of iron, basically, and the second form turned out to be manganese, you see. So you can play around with manganese dioxide thing, but manganese dioxide, one, it's a catalyst, and also it can lock other elements down, so other things can attach to it, and so for an initial period or time it can actually give the appearance of a drawdown or a deficiency sort of thing. So, but you can adjust for that sort of thing. So anyway, so I quite like Sonchus because it can actually go a real turquoise. I mean, and that's why you'd be using it as a test subject. Plus this other one here, this can actually go to a true glaucous turquoise blue sort of thing, this one here. So I've transferred it into that one there, and see how it can handle the water, getting the water up. And this one here, of course, is halfway with, it's got polystyrene halfway up the pot, so now that's generating reductive flammable gas, which is going up through the sand. And I've even got a little seedling in here. I think it's another coat. I'm not sure. I assume it is, because it looks like it might be coming off of the root cutting that I put in there, sort of thing. So this one's really sort of starting to come back now. And I don't even see this. This is weird. I'm just going to put the camera over in different ways so I can take screenshots, but can you see the way the leaves are sort of going like that? That's weird, you know. I have seen it before, but because this one's got charcoal halfway up rather than polystyrene, and of course I think is one of the key principles is one of the things they're after. It has a very low density, so it will actually rise up the pot, but only if it's wet enough to be able to permeate up through the pot, you see. So that's why all the roots are in this sort of upper 1 or 2 inch zone, as they say in the Oostings and Roberts paper, that within the first 3 inches, I think they said. I think it's 3 inches of the soil. It's some very shallow, crazy sort of zonal region in the pot where all the roots are. But then it also says that they can have very long root run, and of course they have long persistent root hairs, which is very crazy for a biologist or a botanist to actually mention. As I've mentioned this before, I've highlighted it. That is a crazy statement, because if you've done your basic botany, you've done your beans, your peas and all those sort of things, they have root hairs on them about this long as it is. That's normal. So if they're talking about long persistent root hairs, what are they talking about? I mean, it would be nice for someone to track down their actual PhD thesis so you can actually see photographs of the roots that they were talking about, because that's what you're supposed to do with a PhD. So when you mention something like that, it's supposed to take a photograph or, you know, some sort of representation of that, so people know what you're talking about. In 200 years' time, when you're not around, your PhD thesis is supposed to tell you those sort of things. So we can go back to the thesis and say, well, when he says long persistent, he obviously, you know, meant it was like twice as long as bean and pea root hairs, or even longer, I don't know, but it should be in there. So I don't even know if you can see this. This one, can you see the colour on that? And that's just polystyrene charcoal with sand on there, but now it's much wetter. Presumably stuff is coming out of the charcoal and permeating up through the sand, so we'll probably get some blooming on there eventually. But yeah, that's quite crazy for this time of year when they're supposed to be dormant. You know, that's another thing I'm trying to say is Roberts and Oostings are correct. They don't actually go dormant. And oh yes, that's the other thing. This thing here, it just keeps getting fatter and fatter, and it's not actually dormant. That's what I'm saying. It's actually growing. You know, yeah. So it's a bit like our plum trees and things like that. Yeah, I've gone through a whole load of. I've gone through that one to this one, and then I've got to this one, and then this one should either be better than that one, and then I'll do another final one, and basically I'll have a basic mix then, and I won't be looking back, I don't think, fellas, yeah, because one, this sand holds half as much water, but then again, you only have to put in basically 50 counts every day, which is barely anything, you know. But you notice the water goes down. You can actually get a general sense of the transpiration rate from these plants. But you put your 50 counts in there, and over about it's only about 3 hours, you can actually see it disappear. And you keep doing that, and you say, well, you know, we're in the middle of the wet, you know, it's not that hot, so you can't really say it's evaporation. So, and the void space in the sand is only 10%, so eventually you do this day after day after day, week after week after week, and it keeps occurring. You've got to put it down to some extent to transpiration, but of course, if you take it into a university setting, they can easily track that down. But I'm telling you, the transpiration rate is pretty amazing for even for weeds, so... So I think I just got the impression we got the whole view of CPs, carnivorous plants in general. It's all totally screwed up. They've got to be a lot wetter. You've got to look at the soil as being an anaerobic soil. You've got to look at grain size if you're using sand. I don't think peat is quite as good because, you know, apparently the organism doesn't like sugars, so break down sugars and things like that. So basically, I think we're doing a lot of things wrong, incorrectly. But getting to the right path, we're always looking at it from the wrong. We're always thinking about roots need oxygen and all that sort of stuff for classical plants, not for semi-aquatic to aquatic plants, which I think some of these weeds and also carnivorous plants are really, in quotes, aquatic plants in a way. They need a saturated, somewhat anaerobic, to microaerophilic to strictly anaerobic soil, and I think you're going to start seeing amazing things. And I said I'm still be looking for, when I get to the Banata, is looking for that stipulant bud to reflex backwards and see roots come out and go down into the soil. So I remember Dennis Daly saying something about seeing Banata in the wild in sphagnum mats, and he said it was pretty amazing. So I'll be looking for things like that as well.